We are going live on the topic of being like militant when it comes to doing the right thing. And I'm going to explain this to you as somebody who's 43 years old and somebody who's made a tremendous amount of mistakes in my life. And so because I'm in a state of massive action, I'm also making mistakes at a faster rate than the average person. And what I'm learning over time is that we think that we could mess up even a little bit, but we actually can't. And even small little mistakes as time goes on winds up becoming very disruptive to your life. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be giving you a number of different secrets that I know and a bunch of different steps that I know about how to be militaristic about doing the correct thing. What I mean by that is just viewing it like you have to do the right thing for your life, okay? And by the way, that includes having fun, that includes smiling, that includes laughing, that includes having joy, it includes all those things. So it doesn't mean that it's not fun. In fact, the main purpose, or one of the main purposes of actually doing the right thing is that you wind up having more fun. You actually wind up having more of a fun life. And I want to lay this out to you and get you thinking about it. Now, as I do this, very briefly, I want to mention that we're going to be doing completely free events coming up in Boston, Washington, D.C., San Diego, and Los Angeles, okay? And Boston and D.C. are coming up very quick. October 18th, the 18th and 19th, 2 full evenings going late. So fly in for this if you happen to want to come to Boston and do a free event, or Washington, D.C., November 1st and 2nd, and that's also going to be a 2 full evening free event. Go to www.selfhelpfreetour.com if you want to get into that free event. Now, by the way, at the event, we take you through an entire process, which is very laid out and very structured to help you to get to what it is that you want as far as your social skills, as far as making money, as far as being spiritually tapped in, as far as taking massive action and building the life that you want. And this is the best course that I do, and it's right in the free tour, okay? Boston and DC coming up, San Diego and LA. We're going to be having other cities later in the year, such as Miami, New York, Philly, all the great cities that we do. That'll be later in the year, okay? So www.selfhelpfreetour.com. Jump on there right now. You get bonuses immediately as soon as you sign up, and book your spot, okay? Completely free spot. And likewise, if you're somebody who is not able to fly into Boston or DC or San Diego or LA coming up, then what you can also do is if you'd like to learn those lessons that I just talked about, go to www.higherpurposeprogram.com. It's listed right here, okay? www.higherpurposeprogram.com. That actually has 2 full free mini courses. One, which is a OG skills, social skills course, okay, that goes really deep on how to build insane social skills. You want to talk about the highest level understanding of social skills? www.higherpurposeprogram.com, completely structured, laid out. It's not free associated like a lot of these that I do. It's completely structured. Course on social skills, and another one on the foundations of personal growth that is just massive, all completely for free. www.higherpurposeprogram.com, completely free mini course. People give me compliments on this every single day on the street. It's been a huge hit. People are going crazy on it. We're just leaving it up a little while longer, so go right now to www.higherpurposeprogram.com and you can actually learn about what we would have taught you at the free event. But of course, the free event also has things like networking and meeting me in person and pressing the flesh and a ton of energy going on. And a lot of time we'll go out all after and kind of party it up. It's just a lot of fun to actually go hit the free course in person. So again, selfhelpfreetour.com. Boston coming up this week. November is going to be Washington, D.C. is coming up quick. And we also have San Diego and Los Angeles coming up in December, okay? Or I think even mid-November and then December. Okay, so make sure that you do that. Now, and by the way, thank you. I see some props here in the other event, such as Chicago. Chicago is absolutely off the chains. And I hope that you enjoyed it. So you're going to be having a similar experience in Boston and DC, LA, San Diego. Okay, so let's talk. You guys ready to talk? Let's talk. We're going to be going very deep. So something that I've realized over time is that, okay, I'm going to lay this out for you as far as how to live an amazing life. And I want to lay this out for you in a couple different sequences. So the first sequence that I want you to understand is that most of what you think is a good life is basically just a giant cope. And if you want to get into thriving, you've got to clearly identify what that looks like. Then from there, what I'm going to lay out is how if you fail to do the right things, usually what will wind up happening is they'll come back to bite you in the ass. And as a result of this, all these other things that you're doing are not going to be worth it, okay? There's so much to life that's just not worth it. If you, I mean, I can't even tell you how much regret I have in my life. Like by the time that you're 43, if you've been taking massive action, even with me having great mentors, reading incredible books, I have regrets that you would not even begin to imagine. These are regrets that haunt me, that give me PTSD, that plague my mind. And so, when you hear me talking about things like trauma release, or you hear me talking about things like meditation, or you hear me talking about things like getting out there and enjoying life, that's because, you hit middle age and you're going to have a lot of regret, and these regrets will haunt you. And, if you see the average person by 43, a lot of them look very stone-faced. They look very beaten down by life. They look calcified in the mind, and it's because so many bad things have happened. So much of their childlike joy has been sucked out of them. And, it gets to the point where, day to day, it can be hard to even cope. Okay? It can even be hard to cope day to day because your mind is literally screaming at you from the different mistakes that you've made and the regrets that you have. Okay? Now, conversely, life can also have a lot of good things, right? And so I want to talk a lot about that. So what does a good life look like? Let's think about this for a minute. I want to first lay this out, then I'm going to talk about the mistakes. A good life, in my opinion, and this, this is a very, very deep topic, but it's everything from, being young, trying out a bunch of different things, figuring out where you have different skills, figuring out how to monetize those different skills so that you can actually have money, learning how to meet other people so that you can enjoy that life with them, learning social skills so that you can learn how to date, eventually to build a family, to have children. I think children and a family is probably, I would say, you might make an argument is the most important thing of anything, although, you could also say, leaving a great contribution and really experiencing the world. And I'd kind of put those probably all equally, right? Having family, making a great contribution to the world, and also experiencing the world, right? So, your children, your family, that's beautiful. Also just going out and seeing the whole country, seeing the whole world and engaging with the whole world, beautiful. But also contributing to the world is very, very beautiful, right? And hopefully at the end of this, you die and your soul goes to the next destination, right? Your soul moves through the veil and moves up and not down in that process, right? You didn't just go through this process to spiritually infect yourself with darkness, but you went through this process to elevate. So, for me, that's things like, at a basic level, if you're young, that means you're trying all these different avenues and lanes. You're looking for cracks in the dam. You're studying business. That could be entrepreneurship, but it could also be what's called intrapreneurship, and learning how to make a lot of money within your company. Because remember that if you're an entrepreneur, you have maybe hundreds or perhaps thousands of clients. If you're an intrapreneur, you have your one main client, which is your boss. That's still a client, so there's nothing wrong with being an entrepreneur. In fact, I think it's just as good. It's just different. I think that if you're actually contributing to something that you believe in, that is also just as good. It's just different, and it's a lifestyle choice. Really just a lifestyle choice. Okay, so inevitably, if you work really, really hard at this and you're looking for cracks in the dam, you start getting paid, and you start actually having the money to do the things that you want to do and to build safety and security for you and your family. So that's very, very important. The other thing, of course, is experiencing the world. And so what I mean by this is that so much of what we see as being called a good life, so much of a good life that we think is good, is just a giant cope. And so what I mean by this is that if I look at the average person, even here in Los Angeles, let's say that they're making $200,000 to $300,000 a year, okay, even at $200,000 to $300,000. Now, if you're listening to that, you're probably thinking, a $300,000 a year paycheck is a lot. But let's say that's cut in half after taxes. Well, what are you dealing with now? Let's say that you have, $13,000, $14,000, $15,000 a month or something, depending on how you're doing that. Okay, $15,000 a month. I mean, what does a house in Los Angeles cost per month? What does it cost to raise a family? Even with $300K a year, that's not really that much if you live in a major city like Los Angeles. I mean, again, that sounds insulting. If you're making less than that, you're like, that's ridiculous. 300,000 is a ton. I get that. I'm not trying to be condescending, but I'm trying to get you thinking a little bit about what it costs to live. And so in doing so, you're talking about, building your business or building your skills, but what is it that you're really doing? At the end of the day, you're doing all this maybe so that you can eat at like a nice restaurant here or there, maybe so you could do a little bit of shopping, maybe so that you could take your kids to soccer practice. Like, where's the big win in this where you start truly, truly winning? And so what I think that a person has to do is at a certain level, you've got to start saying to yourself, like, what is it that I really want to do in life? Like, what is it that gives me really, really high levels of joy? And you've got to get to a point where you're able to actually find cracks in the dam, find ways to make more money, find ways to add more value, and find ways to do what it is that you want to do. That could also be, by the way, not living in a city like Los Angeles and living for cheaper and then having more money as well. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about living a good life. But this is something that is a lot more challenging than people realize. And I really think that most of us go through life without ever having done anything of real significance, okay? From there, if you're able to accomplish that, well, then I hope that you're able to contribute something. I hope that you're able to leave some kind of a legacy. And leaving a legacy is also something that's very, very beautiful. And I hope that you're able to do that as well, because that is something that's going to challenge your mind to expand in ways that you can't even imagine. So, things like contribution or things like leaving a legacy is also massive. Okay, so you've got all these different things, right? So you want to be able to have really, really good dating skills. You want to be able to meet somebody who you really, really like to build a family. You want, in my opinion, you want to be able to enjoy life and go around enjoying life, and you also want to build a legacy. And these are things that if you're not serious about, and if you don't, kind of come at them aggressively and in a serious manner, then in my experience, what winds up happening is you wind up not getting them, and you just wind up being the typical locked in the matrix type of person. And that is probably one of the least fun things that you could ever imagine. And so you've got to view it like there's almost like a firearm at your head that is saying to you, don't wind up like that person. So you've got to actually take that seriously. Now, what I found is that through this process, there's also tremendous mistakes that get made. What are some of these mistakes that get made? Some of them could be things like lacking in integrity. Some of them could be things like not making win-win agreements, not checking in with other people and seeing where they're at and taking their concerns seriously. It could mean bringing the right people around you in the first place and learning how to screen. It could be things like, like my father, for example, was actually going to become an optometrist, and he was actually going to have a pretty good six-figure salary. And then later, he actually had broken up with my mother for about a year. They wound up getting back together, but my mother and him had a toxic relationship. I'm sure a lot of good things in it too, but largely toxic relationship. And then they wound up fighting the whole time. And then my dad wound up actually failing by 1% at his optometrist school. Just came up only 1% short. And that always really haunted me in my personal relationships, where if I would see things like, any kind of friction, it would leave me afraid that I might come up short. And you almost might want to wonder if my father should have cut that off sooner and then got his optometry degree and then wound up with more money. He actually wound up, I think, with a pretty solid job anyway. But it would have been a lot better if he would have done that, right? So there is sort of an element there that you've also got to be careful about who it is that you're bringing into your life. Now, conversely, the flip side of that no one wants to talk about after they're talking about, the woo-woo-woo boundaries, woo-woo-woo, cut everyone off, is, are you cutting off somebody who's a good person? And that also means putting the mirror back on yourself and really, really, really putting the mirror on yourself and doing a lot of deep self-examination of how you're coming across and how you're showing up for other people and your personal characteristics and how you're impacting others that you're working with synergistically as well. And so that's something that I spent years doing. I can tell you I remember I had a breakup in 2014. And even though I thought that the person that I was with had gone a little kooky at the end, I still took responsibility for my percentage of that. And so I actually wound up working with an energy healer coach for 2 years, right? Very LA thing. I met him at Earth Cafe on Melrose. But he's actually incredibly talented. And so I worked with him for about 2 years. And one thing that him and I worked on was me keeping my cool and not ever having me getting angry or blowing up or things like that. And that was something that I really regretted, because I remembered in that breakup, even though I never did anything like too crazy or whatever, but there was times where I'd still get upset about things, right? Usually I had pressure from work and I'd get upset. And I remember when her and I broke up in 2014, I remember I really regretted, if I could go back in time, what would I have done differently in that case? And the funny thing is when you take ownership like that, it's actually a very selfish thing to do, right? Rather just blaming the other person, because what happens is that you can actually learn through that process, right? And so that was a process that involved a lot of forgiveness, right, for the person that I was with, and not demonizing them and try to understand where they're coming from. But it also involved a lot of me looking at myself and, areas that I had contributed, what you would call in the energy work thing, they would call that low vibration energy. Where had I been engaging in low vibration energy? And that was something that I had to look at in great depth. And I took that seriously enough, because the way that I see about it, the way that I think about it is whenever people talk about their ex-girlfriends, for example, or ex-boyfriends or ex-person, it's funny, you refer to them like your ex, like as if it's like, like for example, whenever I meet people out, they'll refer to their ex with this kind of like eye rolling, like, oh, they're so pathetic and I hate them kind of vibe or things like that. And when I see that, I actually have a really high degree of what you kind of call object constancy. Like I have a really, really good memory, and I can remember what somebody means to me, and I can remember what somebody would have meant to me when we first met. So a lot of the time if I have a breakup, it's actually, my brain will kind of reflect on who this person was when we first met, and looking at how that was something that had so much promise in it, and just looking at all the little concessions that were made on both sides, but more importantly, to look at my side of it, and then to see all these little areas that I allowed, what you might even call low vibration energy into that relationship, or places that I would have lacked integrity, places that I wasn't as truthful as I could have been, places that I cut corners, places that I let somebody down, places that I could have given a nice compliment and didn't, or maybe places that I was codependent or needy or things like that, and these are things that I'll, kind of ruminate on, and I'll always have regrets on. But those regrets, in my view, can be washed away to an extent if you can do your best to learn from what it was that happened, right? And so life is this infinite journey of never-ending learning and, kind of going into situations and then eventually trying to see where you went wrong and having regrets and seeing what you would have done about it. In my more recent relationship, I think one area that I messed up a lot was that, I've had people-pleasing tendencies since I'm younger. And so one of the ways that I've kind of propped myself up, that I've gotten really, really good at, which is amazing, is, I'm somebody who's not a natural leader. I'm not a natural alpha male by any means. But, I've kind of learned this little process where I go to the bar or the club and I do my little warm up, and then I warm up and I meet a bunch of people and I get everybody laughing. And then when everybody's laughing, that kind of pumps me up and it builds my confidence. Then I wind up building a really good social life and dating life, and I wind up having a lot of people around and people who really like me. I live up in a house in the hills, so I'll have like a lot of cool guy friends, and I'll have a lot of cool female friends, a lot of cool people that I'm dating. And so I can kind of create a situation where, being like a low-level, dorky YouTube celebrity and having all this all these people backing me up, that's something to where it makes it very, very easy for me to have insane amounts of confidence, right? My confidence is through the roof. So usually when I'm single, I start making a lot of money, like a lot. I also start doing incredible work. I'm very, very effective. I'm effective as a leader. I'm effective as a father. I'm effective as everything. Then sometimes I'll go into a relationship and all of a sudden, I don't have a, groupie entourage, and I don't have the option to just say, oh, this person's being a bit annoying, so I'm gonna just not call them back, and I'm just gonna see this other person, because now you're actually dealing with one person. And one thing they'll tell you in a relationship is that if you don't solve your traumas or unearth them, that the relationship's gonna do it for you. And I've definitely seen that, so then I'd be at a point where I could be in a relationship, and then it's like I almost want the other person to give me the fanfare, this kind of ongoing fanfare that I was not, or that I was getting when I'm single, right? And then my brain plays games with me where I'll say, well, this person's being annoying, and then it's affecting my work and it's affecting my focus. Well, maybe if I just get rid of them and then have 5 girlfriends, then maybe I can focus more. And I think that that's something that I feel like at age 25, and for a lot of people even at age 35, that is actually kind of an empowering approach, just in the sense that you're actually drawing a boundary, right? You're not just saying, okay, I'm going to let somebody be in a bad mood or let somebody be negative. I'm going to show them that I have standards, that I have boundaries. I'm not going to allow that. But I feel like as you get older, and you want to have a family or have more children, then, it gets to the point where like that starts to wear thin after a while. Like that kind of approach starts to wear thin. And so again, I remember post that breakup, one thing that I looked into a lot was codependence or people pleasing, and actually digging into that. And believe it or not, you might be surprised by this, but there's actually a number of different like personality disorders that can stem from childhood. One of them would be things like borderline personality disorder. I've actually dated 3 borderline women in my life, so I know what that looks like definitely up close. And you might be asking, if only like 1 or 2% of the population is borderline, well, why would I have dated 3 different borderline women in my life? And that would be because when you have people-pleasing codependence, you'll tend to attract people like that. Ross Rosenberg calls that human magnet syndrome. And so, if you have some kind of a thing that you haven't dealt with since you're younger, then you may wind up attracting somebody who also could have, whether it's abandonment fears or, could be someone who's narcissistic or things like that, right? Just different people who you get involved with, right? I've had people who I have worked with that I think for sure had NPD. And, it's funny how, if you're codependent or a people pleaser, then you can tend to attract borderlines or you can tend to attract narcissists, right? And so these are things that you can actually look up and you can study. And, it's tempting, if you've dealt with somebody with narcissism or say somebody with BPD, it's very, very tempting to go down the rabbit hole of like just reading about them and reading and understanding them to understand what the heck happened. But what's more important is for you to look at your own stuff, right? So for example, with me in 2014, looking at, say, having a lot of low vibration energy and kind of having little flare-ups emotionally, well, that's something that you actually have to go and look at, okay? You've got to actually go and look at that. If I can detect something in myself to where I can see that I have a pattern to where I'm relying on ongoing fanfare and it starts to affect me negatively if I'm not surrounded by that. On one half, I have to say to myself, well, is that because I just want to be around a more positive environment? Like, could it just be that? Which I think 50% of that is true. I'd say it's about 50% because I think in relationships, it's usually 50-50. Maybe the other person could have been more positive and that would help. But then the other half is you have to look at yourself, which is why are you having that kind of a reaction to their person not being positive? I feel like in my case, what I've often done is like I'm almost just like waiting for it or looking for it. And so that's kind of almost like in my energy field. And then the other person can kind of feel me, kind of waiting for it and looking for it for them to have a hard time. And then what happens is, say that they have an emotional flare because they're having a bad day, because that's inevitable if you're with someone a long time, then you get mad about it, then you become withdrawn, which then makes them feel shut out, which then causes them to, react even more, and then it becomes a pattern, right? And so this is the kind of thing also, I want to be careful about this, that you could know this stuff, right? Like I could be aware of this now, but just because you know that you have a problem doesn't mean that you're fixed or cured or able to be in a serious relationship, because you read something on the internet or because you read a book or watch a YouTube video about it, right? These are the kind of things where you've got to look at it in great, great, great detail. And you've got to say to yourself, like, how am I showing up? And, how am I impacting other people who I'm with? You've got to look at that in incredible detail. And you'll notice how people talk about their exes and they kind of roll their eyes. But like, again, if you have that object constancy and you're able to not have a defense mechanism, right? 'Cause I feel like what we tend to do in relationships, we have a defense mechanism after. We're like, we can't remember the good times or we can't remember the good things the person did. We have to kind of like, just discard them and say that they suck and say like, I'm better off and I'm free. But like, what does it really mean? If you say, okay, I'm free, you cut the person off, you jump to the next person or jump back to ongoing reinforcement of positivity, being single, you go do that, but you haven't really done the work, right? Like say that you just, you have a breakup, you run off, you get a new partner within 2 seconds, start smoking a bunch of weed and say, oh, I fixed my life, right? That's not really fixing your life because you're not fixing your own stuff, right? In my case, my pattern is, okay, well, this person was kind of annoying. I don't need to deal with this anymore. I start doing parties at my crib. I start going out to the club. I start, having a lot of fun, start dating different people. And that's a lot of fun. And it's so much fun, it's ridiculous. And I've actually worked really, really hard to learn how to do that. But it's not really, me kind of taking the feedback or kind of taking the medicine that the relationship is meant to provide, right? And so, a relationship, is meant to be, relationships with other human beings really does reveal this huge, huge, huge amount of who you are, in my case, who I am. And I think what you'll find is as you get older, you'll kind of have these different relationships that you sort of come in and out of, and you'll learn you'll have a lot of fun in each one. I would say that each relationship I've had has been largely a lot of fun. People that I've had the privilege of actually spending time with, including people that even had BPD, literally are amazing. Some of the most amazing people who you've ever seen in your entire life. Even people who I've worked with that are narcissistic. Again, like some of the most incredible people. I've learned a ton from them. And that doesn't mean that everybody that I work with, had a personality disorder. But at the same time, you also have to learn the lessons from that, right? You've actually got to take lessons from that. And so what you'll find is that if you fail to take those lessons and you fail to view life as that infinite journey of learning, then what's going to happen is it's sort of like this thing where it's going to keep happening again and again and again and again. And so, a lot of problems that I've seen in my own life will continue to happen again and again and again. You'll have tremendous regret around it until you actually make the decision to fix it, okay? And so I've experienced this in my own life. I have, it's a pattern of like, I'm using relationships as an example, and then we're going to go into some other areas, but, it's a pattern of like first feeling very, very betrayed and then feeling angry, then realizing that feeling betrayed and angry is really just poisoning yourself, and it's really a cope, and it's completely a cope. It's completely a defense mechanism. But what winds up happening is that you feel angry and betrayed, Then later you have to find forgiveness. But then the problem is that if you actually find forgiveness, then what winds up happening is that you actually feel worse because then you miss the person, but you've got to find forgiveness. And then what you have to do is you've actually got to start to try to understand them better so that you can learn more about human nature and who it was that you had that experience with. But most important is you've got to start to understand yourself. And was it perhaps that you were with somebody who just, nobody could make it work with? Perhaps that could be true. But largely, it's not going to serve you very well to have that kind of an assumption other than as a coping mechanism, because what you've got to do instead is you've actually got to start looking at yourself and saying, okay, well, how is it that I'm showing up, right? And then again, don't just jump into another relationship right away. You can date people and have fun. I'm doing that, is amazing, but you don't want to jump at anything too heavy, because if you do that too quickly, then you haven't solved the problem, okay? So, it's like, I would say that, going out and meeting new people is the foundational skill set that you have to have, right? You've got to have that foundational skill set, because if you don't have that foundational skill set, you're lost. Then what you have to have is the ability to meet somebody of high quality. Then when you meet somebody of high quality, you've got to go into that relationship and do your best, but assume that if you're young, probably that relationship's going to fail. It just probably is. It doesn't mean that it will for sure, but there's a high likelihood that it will fail. From that, then you've got to go through that process of saying to yourself, okay, well, what did I learn? Why am I not going to be mad at that person? Like, again, you've got to go through a process of forgiveness. Then you've got to go through a process of forgiving yourself, because once you forgive them, what you've done wrong, you've actually got to start to, look at. Then you've got to go through a process of, trying to think with retrospect who it was that you were spending all that time with and understanding them better. But then most important is that you've got to start to look at yourself. So again, if you look at me, in 2014, even after I was with somebody who was like pretty off the wall, I still spent 2 years doing work, about an hour a day. I spent a couple $100,000 just looking at the energy that I was carrying in my body and releasing a lot of trauma, and looking at how I was showing up. And this really, really changed my life profoundly. I definitely would say that me even looking at things like people pleasing in middle age is something that, I could benefit hugely from looking at, because the problem is that when you have these tendencies, you'll build webs upon webs upon webs upon webs upon webs upon webs upon webs of problems. So you've got to be thinking this yourself. Now, by the way, if you'd actually like to learn these base level ideas about how to meet new people, well, first of all, you can come out to a free event. Boston is coming up on October 18th, completely free 2-day event. Washington, D.C. is coming up on November 1st, okay, another completely free 2-day event, and we've got a completely free 2-day event in San Diego and a completely free 2-day event in Los Angeles. We might even expand that to 3 days because we have a really big crowd coming. So we've got big crowds at all of them, but LA is going to be huge. So I would suggest to get to those, but if you can't make it to those right now for any reason, though, I'd really just tell you to fly in. Go to www.higherpurposeprogram.com, and we actually lay out the skill sets of how to meet new people in great detail, very OG style. And also we have a Fundamentals of Personal Growth series in there that is just going to blow your freaking mind, okay? Now, it's funny, as I'm mentioning this, okay, as I'm saying this, what I also want to mention to you is that just having a lot of money, okay, like me sitting here and saying that I've, done, I often comment I've done over $100 million in sales, or me saying, okay, I have this dating life, right? And back in the day, we'd post a lot of videos showing all that stuff, and it's pretty awesome. Just because somebody says, I'm good at meditating, or I'm good at dating, or I'm good at making a lot of money, understand that, like, if you don't have those things, then you definitely need to be making a major, major effort to go get those things. But in addition, that doesn't necessarily make a complete life, right? Like, if you get somebody who is emotionally unhealthy, getting better at dating may actually magnify those problems, okay? If you're not emotionally whole, maybe because of childhood, that can actually magnify those problems. Likewise, if you make a lot of money and you're not emotionally whole, that can also serve to magnify those problems. So, the Notorious B.I.G., he said, more money, more problems, right? Well, I'd say that money is a magnifier of who you are, right? Having social success is a magnifier of who it is that you are. So you've also got to be looking at, where is it that you are emotionally, like what is the place that you're coming from? But you've also got to be thinking to yourself, where are you spiritually, right? A lot of what I just talked about here was an emotional component, but then there's also a spiritual component, which is, are you coming from a place, some people might call that a place of high vibration. Are you coming from that place? Or are you coming from a place of contribution? Or are you coming from a place of ego and low vibration energy? And this is also something that in personal growth, you're not going to really see advertised a lot, because It just doesn't really make very good sales copy, right? Like if I tell you, fly out to Boston or fly out to DC, and come attend a free event, www.selfhelpfreetour.com, or, say that I say to you, jump into higher purpose program and, you'll learn about adding a high vibe to the world or something like that. That's not something that's necessarily a very appealing proposition to the average person. And the truth is that it's not very appealing to the average person just for the simple fact that the average person really hasn't done much in life, right? Like for me as a teacher, I understand that if I'm talking to you, you may not have done a ton in your life, right? I have a lot of wealthy and successful clients. I have a range of clients, but there's a large number of clients and students that are watching this or viewers that have not done a ton in their lives. And so, if I get into these kind of like higher level nuances, like, well, what's the place that it's coming from? Or what's the spiritual contribution or the legacy contribution? Are you gonna have kids from this? Things like that. It's kind of too many layers removed from what it is that the average person wants to do. But the problem is that I love capitalism, but capitalism also often does reinforce pandering to the lowest common denominator. And so, even in my own case, I'd see things like making millions of dollars or having a lot of dating success. I would see that as something that I viewed as the be all end all, and that all of your problems are solved when you do that. But in reality, these are going to magnify wherever it is that you're at. And it's going to create these kind of like Frankenstein-esque kind of freaky results that if you don't deal with this stuff, it can really, really blow up in your face, right? I mean, we saw that with Julian, where Julian had some low vibration energy that he's hanging on to. And then he had that issue in 2014, right? And so he got more fame, he got more money, he had more social success. But that kind of built and that blew up in his face in this huge, tremendously regretful way, right? And that's not the kind of thing when something like that happens that you get to just apologize and move past it. That's the kind of thing where you've got to do a lot of deep self-reflection. Julian never, ever, ever, ever was doing the things that were said about him. But the point is that he was coming from a general negative attitude. And from that standpoint, he actually took responsibility for the part that he did feel was his mistake. And he actually really had to look at himself in great detail and see where it was that he's coming from, right? And that's a lot of self-examination. And, the kind of self-examination, that you're doing when you do that is very, very humbling, right? It's the kind of thing where you've got to let go of your ego, right? Because your ego is kind of propping you up, right? Remember I talked earlier about how, say that you're single and you're, dating all these people and you're making a ton of money and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of pumping up your winner effect. It's pumping up your dopamine, which is a good thing. It actually makes you a better leader. But at a certain point, you've got to start to look at that stuff and you've got to humble yourself and you've got to say, okay, well, where is it that I'm coming from? What are the mistakes that it is that I've made? And you've got to start to look in great, great depth at where those mistakes happened and what went on in incredible depth. And that's something that means that you're going to be living with regret. You're going to be living with, tremendous regret. And it's going to be the kind of thing where you've got to kind of throw your hands up in the air and be like, I'm sorry. And you've got to start to like look at yourself in incredible detail and understand that this means that you're a very, very strong person if you can do this. Okay, people that are not strong, they're not capable of taking any kind of personal responsibility. They're not capable of pulling out a mirror. They're not capable of getting feedback for where they're going wrong because their self-image isn't strong enough and they're in a more of a coping pattern. And so they're just trying to keep themselves above water, right? Drugs like marijuana are like massive total copes. Alcohol is a total cope. Binging on unhealthy food is a total cope, right? To where, your self-image, you have too high a sense of shame, too low a sense of self-esteem. You're not ready to do the work. It just hurts too much. You've got to blame other people. You've got to say the other person's bad. And you're not ready to do the work, right? And so that is a cope. I've definitely been there. I've been in coping patterns myself. I'm not proud of that. I'm ashamed of that. But then there comes a point where you say, okay, I've got to start to look at myself. And you've got to start sitting there and reviewing in great depth. You've got to start reviewing in incredible depth what it was that just happened, right? Somebody like Julian, he's got to actually sit, in 2014, he's got to spend like a year or two really sitting there, humbly, with humility. And he's got to say, what place am I coming from? Again, he never did the things that they said about him, but he still believed that he was coming from a negative place in certain areas. And so he's got to actually sit there and, look at himself in incredible, incredible detail, right? And that's not the kind of thing that happens overnight, okay? You don't read a codependence book or a low vibration energy book and go, I've changed, right? Change takes commitment. It takes time. It takes humility. And it's really a process of seeing how this flurry of action that you've been doing, like all these things that you've been doing, taking massive action, have yielded positive results, which could include money, could include dating, could include travel, but it also has negative outcomes. And so you've got to sit there and you've got to actually go through your negative outcomes. And you've got to have the humility to look at that in incredible detail, right? Now, in a relationship, you might be doing that and the other person might not be doing that. And that's why non-contact is common in the end of a relationship, right? Because, you could call the other person and be like, I'm looking at myself, I've changed, I can change, all that kind of stuff. And they may not be ready to do that. So even you talking to them about you doing that might, they could still be in the coping phase, and they're not able to do that themselves yet. You know what I'm saying, right? So they might just be like, yeah, good that you're doing that. That's good that you did that, right? But they're not able to go through their process. And so they might feel relief that you're looking at yourself, but they also might feel insulted or mocked in a way or condescended because they're not ready to do that themselves. And the truth is they may never be ready. Some people are in a permanent coping pattern. Some people go back to drugs. Some people go back to blame, and they're not able to do that. But it's always this thing where in any situation, if you've contributed negativity or in life that you've engaged in anything, there's probably some negativity that you engage with. So this is going to happen whether that's in a romantic relationship, this could be in a business partnership, this could be in something that you're trying to build, this could be in things that you're putting in your body like drugs or alcohol or food. This could be in any action that it is that you take, right? And so there's going to be these periods in life where you're basically on a high, and then God is going to come in and smash you down, and then you're going to have to sit there and look at yourself in great detail. And it could be that you were 5%, at fault for something. But if you want to continue to improve, it's that 5% that you've got to keep coming back to. Now, let's actually continue. Let's go in more detail. So from that, and I'm actually going to have a look at, let's see here. I'm going to, do we have any, let me just roll up the comments a little bit. I just want to check the comments here just in case there's anything. Cool, I see you guys are enjoying this. Well, thank you. I see people enjoying the broadcast, so thank you. Well, let's just keep going then. These are all just, give me some props. Thank you guys. So, okay, let's keep going. So I believe that there's kind of lessons that you're going to see, and you're going to see these are internal lessons. It could be spiritual, could be emotional, could be identity-based, could be trauma-based. And then I also feel that there's external lessons. That could be execution and competence and dealing with the ambiguity of life and different actions that have to be taken, integrity, things like that. So the inner lessons, and this is not really very sexy, and it's not something that I think a lot of people want to hear about, but I believe that the reason and the space that you're coming from of why you do things, I kind of just think like, and this is just what I've learned over the years, like you'll hear me say these really preachy things like, do it to add value, do it to honor your creator, do it to honor God, do it to make the world better. You hear things like this, and as a younger person, hearing somebody in middle age or older age saying this, it kind of just feels like the person doesn't know how to have a lot of fun in life, like their life has got kind of boring or crappy, and they don't know how to have a lot of fun. And so, they're going to shame you. Like they got to go have fun, and then they're going to sit there and they're going to shame you. And I could 100%, I could 100% feel that way, like completely. Of course, I could understand where that's coming from. I get that. But I think that people who are older, they also do have some wisdom. And it's a shame because a lot of the time you just got to experience this for yourself. You just got to see it in person. It's like you can be warned about this, but you've got to actually experience it. I wonder what a society could look like that we could fast forward these lessons to our kids more quickly. But the problem is that the same person that would be giving the lesson looks kind of like a dork. So, you don't really want to listen to them. I think maybe the answer is to actually be somebody who's having like a lot of fun. Like, imagine as I continue to build, my content, if I have a lot of fun and I'm always doing cool stuff, that if I give a lesson like this, I think people will be a little bit more inclined to listen. So, I feel like maybe the most important job of a father is actually to be cool. You know what I mean, right? Like imagine if your dad was just super duper cool and then you wanted to be like your dad and you view your dad as a superhero and then your dad tells you some of these lessons, you might be more inclined to listen. But anyway, what you'll find is like, if you do things out of ego, or you do things out of win-lose, or you do things to prove another person wrong, or you don't have love for all people, or things like that, you'll just find, and it doesn't mean to tolerate horrific things, I'm just saying, but you can come from a space of love. You'll find that there's these weird karmic layers and karmic residue that just really, really comes back to bite you very, very badly. And you'll wind up paying a price for this. There really is something to this idea of karma, where, it's like whatever action you take, you get it back times 3 or times 10 or whatever it would be, right? Like I could definitely tell you that, if I put out, say, this video or any video that I put out, I bet you, if it's good and it's contributing something, I'm probably going to get back a really, really big ROI on that. Easily me making a broadcast like this and releasing it, I'll probably get 100x ROI, not just 3. So the cool thing in life is that you can plant good seeds. But I've also seen it to where, I've planted bad seeds that I'm not proud of. And I've seen it to where that also comes back to bite me. And it's like whatever it was that I thought that I got on the front end of that behavior, it didn't really, help me on the back end. Right? There's always like a regret that's there. And unfortunately what happens in life is that we start to make these mistakes and we start to accumulate regrets. And if you're not careful, by the time that you're in your 40s, you can be like, most 40-year-olds that I see are so utterly calcified in regret and trauma. The only way that they can even start to enjoy life is just alcohol or marijuana. That's about it, right? Literally, like their life is just, paying for their kids to live, getting drunk or getting high, because they're so baked, almost like a fried chicken with this like golden layer on the outside of crispy fried stuff, just covered in so much trauma that you can't even see the chicken on the inside anymore, and the chicken's just saturated in all this oil and things like that. Okay, so I want you to be the rotisserie chicken, not the fried chicken. You see my point? So you've got to be really, really careful about that, right? And you've also got to learn to forgive yourself for these things, and you've got to learn to actually release them so that you could be that kind of fun and dynamic person into middle age and older age, and not to be in a coping pattern where just so much stuff has happened that you're just like, just drinking and smoking. But you've actually got to be at a point where you're actually thriving and enjoying life, because really your 40s, 50s, 60s is the chance for you to actually have the bountiful harvest of what it is that you've built in your life, and hopefully there's enough good things that you can actually enjoy that. So very, very, very critical that you, are taking lessons, forgiving yourself, and forgiving other people for what's happened. Forgiveness for yourself and others is very, very important, and then taking the lessons and moving forward. But even by the fact that you're forgiving yourself, you've still got to reflect on yourself and look at different things like lessons that you've had. And yes, forgive yourself, but that doesn't mean to let yourself off the hook. And that also doesn't mean to self-attack yourself, right? Self-attack is just another form of low vibration energy. It's actually one of the main forms that my energy coach taught me. But it's one of these things where, you don't want to be sitting there attacking yourself, but you just want to be productively ruminating, on what it was that happened. And don't just let yourself off the hook immediately. So let me talk to you a little bit about this process, okay? I'll talk to you a little bit about the process of this. So one of the great principles in the Bible is forgiveness. And if you read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and I'd recommend that you do that. David Suchet is the best reader. You can find him on YouTube, DavidSuchet. Read the Gospels, and it really doesn't take that long to read these. People are very resistant to reading them. They have too much, there's so much energy wrapped around these things. But what you'll see is that forgiveness is such a huge part. And what Jesus talks about is he says, anybody can just forgive, can wish good upon your friends, right? Or, you could just forgive, somebody who you're getting along with. But it's something even more powerful to forgive an enemy. It's something more powerful to even help an enemy. And the reason why that is because it makes you a very, very big person. Okay, a very, very big person. And it means that you're not going, because you have to understand that life is going to have so much being thrown at you, right? There's going to be so much in life that's trying to put that fried chicken batter around your spirit. And so if you don't have that capacity to forgive, what starts to happen is that by the time that you're my age, you've had so many knives shoved in your back, just so utterly many knives shoved in your back, that you're literally just walking through life, just mumbling about all the people that did you wrong, right? That's something I have to be careful of. At my best is this powerful speaker and somebody who's adding value and somebody who's really happy and experiencing life in nature. Me at my worst is me, sitting around in the morning, maybe on a bad night of sleep, mumbling about all the people that did me wrong and the people that let me down and the people that, did this or that or the other thing. And, the problem is that as you get older, these wounds keep accumulating. And, before you know it, there's, you've had it to where one person's stabbed you in the back, 2 person has, 3 people have, 5 people have, 10 people have, 20 people have. then maybe you hit a point where like the closest person in your life, like maybe you have this person in your life that was like the one person who wouldn't do that, but then they do that, and then you feel discarded and you feel worthless, right? And you get feelings of worthlessness and like, why do I even have worth? Why should I even be alive? Why do I even want to live on a planet like this, right? And it can literally start to suck your soul down into hell. And, you've got to start to ask yourself, well, first of all, for the people that stabbed you in the back, what was your role in that? Why are you the common denominator in that? You've got to start to ask yourself that. It could be things like your bad behavior, but it could also be things like, I've talked about codependence. Maybe you're codependent and you're also bringing the wrong people around. So you probably brought people around that have their own issues that they're dealing with, but you probably also acted badly, which then compounded it, right? So it's always going to be that kind of, whether you call it 50-50 or whatever it is that you want to call it, but there's, going to be these things that are like that. So you've got to actually find forgiveness to purify yourself to some extent. I don't know if purification might be a bit extreme, but I think that's kind of like a noble goal, is to say, I want to purify myself and I don't want to hold on to grudges with people. I've got to let this go. And I've got to also take accountability for where are my deficiencies, where either I had a low integrity, or maybe I have something unhealed in me that's bringing around the wrong people, or maybe within that relationship itself, I was behaving in a way that's inappropriate or not cool or things like that. And, you've got to start looking at that in incredible detail, right? So you've got to forgive yourself, but you've also got to forgive other people. And then you've got to sit there and like I said, you've got to start going through like what it was that happened, within these different situations and really trying to get a sense of it and auditing it so that you can learn something from it. And maybe have people who you can talk to about it, or have, groups where you could talk about this stuff. And it's the kind of thing where, yes, your winner effect or your confidence is going to take a hit, but look at the people who are unwilling to do this, what that looks like, right? In effect, if you're unable to do that, you're in effect simulating NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. You're simulating somebody that has a personality disorder. Because people with, understand this, people with NPD, much like a codependent, much like a borderline, they are damaged from childbirth. And they maybe had parents that didn't give them the attention that they need. And so what they do is they cut off all feedback where they could feel bad, because they feel so bad and so worthless that they cut it off. And their brain just kind of like, almost like kind of solders that, like anything that would have involved self-reflection or accountability or being wrong, the brain actually like creates like a bypass of that part of the brain. It bypasses it. So they always feel like they're right all the time. And they're always blaming other people all the time, and they're not able to take responsibility. I've dealt with people that have NPD up close, and they're physically incapable of taking responsibility. They will look at anybody who's doing something amazing and completely wipe away all of that person's accomplishments. Anybody who does them wrong, they just hate them. They don't reflect on anything. And what that serves a function to do is that it builds their confidence. A lot of people with NPD or narcissistic personality disorder have tremendous confidence. I mean, these are people that you'd view as some of the most confident people in the entire world. But what they will also do, like I said, you reap what you sow. They will wind up making critical errors. And in that process of making critical errors, what's going to wind up happening is they will mess up. They'll mess up really, really big because they don't even have self-awareness. And then they're going to get hit with low vibration energy and kind of a karmic pendulum swing that is insane. Okay, the kind of karmic pendulum swings that they're going to get hit with are insane. So what they're trying to do is they're kind of trying to go on this sort of rocket ride, to the top. And in this rocket ride to the top, they're building confidence and they're stacking wins. But the problem is what goes up must come down. And they are building one of the biggest structures that is going to collapse that you've ever seen. And in any way, shape, or form where I have engaged, I'm the last thing of NPD, the opposite of it, but I'm the exact opposite of it. But whenever I've engaged in those tendencies, which I have at times, just because it's just mental laziness and mental shortcuts, I have typically seen that will come and collapse right on my face like a ton of bricks, and I've got to look at that. Okay, so these are things that are kind of internal to look at. The space that you're coming from. Are you doing it for God? Are you doing it for adding? Are you doing it to add value to other people? Are you acting from a space of win-win? Are you acting from a space of adding to other people? I know that this stuff doesn't sound cool, but again, when you're not, it inevitably comes back to bite you in the ass. Okay, so it's not this thing where you're trying to be shamed or, I'm not sitting here trying to shame you, right? Because shame is a funny thing where, one of the best ways to just have authority with people, just take authority over other people's reality, is just to shame them. Just be like, are you pure? Even like, one of the darker sides in the Bible is that people feel like, they're having this like shame stick being beaten on them as a way of making them feel terrible and then asking them to repent, right? If you've actually like not built a business, not created a good job, you could get paid just by saying, I'm here to shame you and force you to repent to me. So, that's a place where people actually hate the idea of atoning, right? Because they feel like that's what's been happening. And they feel deep shame, and that shame has actually been used against them. But if you actually look in the Bible, for example, it's really not about that, right? The Bible's not about shame, it's actually about forgiveness. But it's also about being realistic with you about having a very, very high standard and explaining to you that if you don't have that high standard, you're going to go right to hell. And hell starts now, okay? You've got to understand that. Hell starts immediately. It's something that starts immediately. It's something that, you don't need to wait till you die to go burn in a fiery pit. Like the fiery pit starts a lot quicker than you think. It starts a lot quicker than you think. There's also other elements to this that are other elements that I would explain that you've got to think about. Like, for example, some people would believe that, and there's a lot of religions and New Age circles that believe this, that when you're coming from a low vibration space, you're actually attracting these kind of like spiritual incarnate entities that you're inviting into yourself, and they can actually start to run you. And this is the kind of thing that, like, it's a little bit hard to explain through a YouTube broadcast. But if we were hanging out in real life, I wouldn't just explain it in a broadcast. I'd just walk through the streets with you. Here in Los Angeles, there's quite the cast of characters. And so what I would do is I would just walk through the streets with you, and I would go meet other people with you, and I could really show you what I believe is running somebody. And I could predictably show you what they're going to say, how they're going to think, how they're going to act. And whether or not that's like some spiritual incarnate entity that they've invited into, it's giving them power, or whether or not that's just mental illness, I'm not entirely sure. But whatever the case, when you're making these mistakes, you're kind of inviting that into yourself. This is where things like drugs and alcohol are another pitfall, that you have no idea what it is that you're doing to yourself. Because in the process of dealing with the cope that is drugs and alcohol, weed is the biggest cope that I can think of. Alcohol is another one. All drugs are copes. I get it that you can get these like, epiphanies from them, but used in the way that they're typically used as a cope. And so basically what winds up happening is that you're gaining power not from the fact that you're adding value to others, or the fact that you are contributing, or the fact that you are connected to God, or the fact that you are, being expansive. You're gaining power just from a high that you're taking in externally, right? Much like me, if someone's getting annoying in a relationship, dumping them, going on this total epic adventure of being single, doing parties, things like that, and I'm gaining my power from outside myself. That's actually all that is if I'm doing that. Like, yes, at 25, that's powerful. 35 is pretty badass. 43, that's called being a codependent, right? That's called being a really, really, really skilled codependent. Now, if you want to learn how to date, you could talk to me about that, because I'm good at that. If you want to learn how to make a lot of cash, talk to me about that, because I'm good at it. But the problem is that if that's coming from a space of looking outside myself for my power, then inevitably there's going to be some kind of negative outcome to that later that I'm going to regret and I'm going to pay the price for. And what's inevitably going to happen is, yes, I'm going to have fun, meeting and dating new people and having intimate experiences, but whatever pleasure that I'm going to get from that is going to wind up blowing up in my face and creating more negative emotions overall, right? And that same thing could be like, sitting at home eating Cheetos and smoking weed and never visiting Alaska, right? You actually, if you would have just worked harder, you actually would have got to go on that Alaska trip, right? Maybe if you worked harder, you would have had better safety for your children. If you would have worked harder, you could have had a better nest for your children. If you would have worked harder, you could have given to more charity. If you would have worked harder, you could have bought cooler clothes. If you know what I'm saying, right? Like I throw the clothes thing in because it's like a cool thing for you. It's not just about other people. You're also a person. You want to pour into yourself too. Maybe you could have taken more seminars, et cetera, but you see the point. So it's one of these things where, there's consequences to not dealing with childhood trauma, like what I talked about, codependence, NPD, BPD, all these things. If you have NPD, BPD, codependence, any of these things, you can deal with this stuff. These are things that are fixable. There's a therapy people commonly talk about. I think it's called DBT or something like that. But there's other ways of doing it too, right? So you've got to fix that, or there's consequences. You've got to get really, really good at entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship, or there's consequences. You've got to get, you'll wind up having a boot shoved on your neck by the man for most of your life. You're going to have an unfit existence, like a life that's almost not worth living in some ways. You've got to get better at socializing. You're going to wind up dating the wrong people. You got to get better at socializing. You're going to wind up having a partner who you're not that into. Get better at socializing because you want somebody to be a mother to your kids who you really love, right? So there's consequences to that, right? There's consequences to not getting into abundance in your dating life, even though there's a limit to where that can take you that I addressed during this talk. But nonetheless, you still have to get into abundance. Why is that? You've got to get into abundance, because if you don't, then you're going to be walking on eggshells whenever you're around somebody, because you're in scarcity, right? That's not good either. So there's consequences to that. So there's financial consequences, there's social consequences, there's spiritual consequences, there's emotional consequences, there's the karmic consequences, there's bringing low vibration entities into yourself if you believe in that, consequences. There's a guy named Andrew Huberman this week did a video about damage to the brain with marijuana. And he's somebody who's incredibly intelligent, and he's somebody who strikes me as largely unbiased. And if you look at his broadcast, it's frankly terrifying. What he explains about weed is it's just absolutely terrifying. I'd look up Andrew Huberman. Is that what it's called, Andrew Huberman? Yeah, and it's how do you spell that?
Huberman,
H-U-B-E-R. Yeah, Huberman, right? And it talks about the consequences of smoking weed. And it's the kind of thing where, initially, they're putting people in jail for weed, which is totally insane, totally unethical. And they're saying that it's like the devil's lettuce, and they're making it look like it's crack cocaine and that kind of thing. It's not at all. And that's this huge exaggeration. Then the pendulum went to the other side, where people are viewing it as some kind of a health food and not a problem at all. And I think guys like Dr. Amen, who created Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, you should look up Dr. Amen, or look up Andrew Huberman, his recent podcast on the effects of cannabis. What they're beginning to show is no, it's not the Ronald Reagan, neocon devil's lettuce, like crack cocaine. No, it's not, it probably has healthy properties, actually does, has some upsides, but, it's not just this pure, health food. I've literally met people or dated people that are I'm really into health like you. I love how you're into health, Owen. I'm into health too, I'm into cannabis. They literally think being into cannabis is a health food. And then, guys like Dr. Amen or Huberman that actually do the brain scans, and they do a lot of testing, they begin to show that the consequence of this that's really, really scary. And, the problem with things like weed is, what do you do when you've been smoking weed and now your ability to determine reality has been lessened? And so now you're dealing in this kind of complicated, world that you're navigating. And what winds up happening is that you're trying to navigate this complicated world and this complicated life and this complicated spiritual existence, complicated entrepreneurship, all that. And you've lost discernment to where you can't even function properly. You're not able to see reality correctly. It's very disassociative. And it's becoming more and more and more disassociative, and it's actually adding up. You're making a terrible decision. Or maybe you're binging on food, and you're using food as a way to stuff down your emotions. I've definitely done that. And, you're dealing with all this stuff and you just binge down on food. And then, now to lose the weight, it's going to mess you up. I mean, look at me, right? I've definitely run way too heavy in recent years. And I was skiing this year, and then I wound up blowing out my ACL. Now, I've actually been back in the gym and eating a lot more healthy for about 3 months now. I'm actually kind of getting back in shape. I don't even want to talk about it until I go do it. So I'm just saying that to reassure anybody. I don't even want to talk about it until I go do it. But the point is if I had been leaner, and more fit, and if I tell everybody, get a mentor. I had some skiing mentors that I paid good money for, but not enough. And I was going down a double black diamond hill, and then I blew out my ACL, right? That'll be a permanent, I'll fix this and it'll be fine. It's not the end of the world. But also realize that, this will be an arthritis risk for the rest of my life, which is good. It'll force me to stay lean, probably extend my life because I'll be forced to stay lean. It's like a gun at your head to stay lean. But it'll be an arthritis risk for the rest of my life. Maybe stem cells can fix it. But it's one, you've got to get the surgery to fix it, but maybe stem cells can fix it. I'm actually, hiking and I'm, lifting weights on it and stuff. It's in pretty good shape. But at some point, I've got to do a proper ACL surgery because it's completely torn. It doesn't just reconnect. But look at that, right? Think about the 7-month rehab that I'll do on that just because I didn't cross my T's and dot my I's. I actually skied almost every major ski hill this past year. And I did that, with my ex-girlfriend and with my kids. And so the thing is I did all that, which was a beautiful experience. And I actually didn't fall the entire year except one time when I was showing Dylan how to ski at the start of the year, and he pulled me down. And I remember that the little latch on the ski didn't pop. I was like, whoa, I think the binding is on too tight. But then I thought, should I go fix that or should I keep go skiing? I'm like, I'll just keep skiing. I actually didn't fall for the rest of the entire ski season. I was doing some pretty tough hills. First year back. But then, of course, my very final run that I did this season was in Vail, Colorado. And I got cocky and I got separated from my kids. And I tried to take a double black diamond hill and I went down and I blew up my ACL, right? Because the binding didn't pop. So the thing is that simple mistake to not have better mentors with skiing, that simple mistake of taking too risky of a ski hill and just thinking that I'll be fine, that mistake of even letting my kids get away from me was a mistake, the mistake of not checking the bindings that one time, that winds up creating these nightmare situations, right? Now, I can say to myself, oh, everything happens for a reason. You know, the fact that I'll have an ACL surgery means that I need to stay lean to keep pressure off the knee for the rest of my life, probably extend my life by 10 or 20 years. That's probably true. That's probably true, right? You know, there's lessons, you know, say the codependence thing, right? So, you know, have a relationship, ends, oh, you learn about codependence. Oh, okay, well, you know, if that wouldn't have ended, you never would have looked at codependence. Oh, it happened for a reason. That's probably true. But you also have to understand that, like, at a certain point, a better way to live life is to try to understand the lay of the land and to learn from other people's mistakes and to learn from other people's lessons so that you can actually, you know, try to not make those mistakes going into it, right? Or if you, and you know, what are some telltale signs to see if you're making mistakes? What are some things like that? What I would say would be one of them is that if you can feel that you're in LVE, if you can feel that you're in low vibration energy, well then start to really examine that and unearth why that is. If you can see that you're with somebody and you're kind of like rubbing them the wrong way or hurting them in some emotional capacity, you know, begin to look at what that might be that's causing that. You know, start to really look at that. You know, if you're doing things like saying, oh, I'm just going to blast down a double black diamond when you don't have a mentor, well then maybe go get a mentor, right? Like these are mistakes. You know, or if you're doing something very selfishly, narcissistically, you know, say to yourself, well, you know, what are some of these great spiritual truths that have been studied for, you know, thousands and thousands of years that obviously you've got to be careful of, right? You know, it could be like, just think of how many people have unprotected sex and pull out, and they think that that will be fine, and how many people wind up with unplanned pregnancies from pulling out, or STDs from pulling out. Right? And it's one of these things where, you know, you hear your friends that are like, go for it, raw dog it, you know, stuff like that. And you're like, okay, I can make that mistake. You know, you see a bunch of your friends smoking weed and you think, oh, I can smoke a bit of weed. Go look up the Andrew Huberman video that just came out. I mean, you see that, it's just, it's heartbreaking, right? To see what people are doing to themselves. Look up Dr. Amen. Like Dr. Amen's like the nicest guy. He actually has like a lot of like liberal clientele, right? Who love their weed. And he's like, I love you guys. You know, like some of his clients are like Jessica Alba or the Kardashians. He's like, look, I really love you guys, and I don't mean to take your weed away from you, but I'd really look at these brain scans. You might want to look at what this is doing in your brain. You know, right? Like he's looking at the whole trend of the weed thing, and he's like, this is crazy. Like, what's going on here? You know, again, it's not crack cocaine. Doesn't mean people should be put in jail. I think these are incredible civil rights victories that we've decriminalized this. I don't think that you need to hire the government to go arrest people for this at all. But it doesn't mean that you have to frame it as a health food, right? At Erewhon here in Los Angeles, there's all sorts of stuff like that right in the health food store. So it's one of these things where, you know, you can begin to see these different errors that are getting made. And this has been a talk largely about errors, you know what I'm saying? Right, about regret. And you're going to live with these regrets. But like I said, you've got to forgive yourself, you've got to forgive others, you've got to take the lessons. And the way that your life is going to wind up looking, ideally you don't want a life where it's just mistake, 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 feel bad. And it shouldn't just be win, narcissism, win, narcissism, win, narcissism. It should be a life where you have the humility to see where it is that you messed up and then to fix it. And look, this was something that I did with my social skills for years, right? Is that we'd go out to bar club, we meet a bunch of people, and some nights we had great success, other nights we did not. And we did something called a debriefing, right? You ever heard that, a debriefing? Or we do a field report. And what we would do is we'd sit there and we would try to break down what we would have done better. And that could be a breakdown on the way that you start a conversation. That could be a breakdown in your inner game. It could be a breakdown in your outer game and technique. It could be a breakdown in, you know, the things that you invited people to. It could be a breakdown in your social media. It could be a breakdown, you know, when you're out, you know, when you're in private. There could be a breakdown anywhere that you made some kind of you could have done better, right? So the idea being is that you want to be looking at that on an ongoing basis, finding win-wins with the people who you're meeting, you know, spending more time auditing where somebody else is coming from and what would be a win for them, and then figuring out how to become someone that would attract them by it being a win-win, right? Not just saying you want to stay the same person who's lazy, but then get that result, right? Or say that you want to have a successful marriage or relationship. You don't want to say, oh, I want to keep being the same person, but then I want to get a better relationship. You'll see this all over Instagram. Instagram is always going to be about boundaries, like having a higher self-worth, higher self-love, higher boundaries, right? It's always high self-worth, higher self-love, better boundaries, get rid of toxic people. It's okay to walk someone away from someone's hurting you, all this kind of stuff. They'll talk about that stuff, but that's half the equation. All of that information is dead on accurate. But you'll rarely see that paired with, you don't just get to keep being the same person and then get the relationship that you want. You've got to actually have the humility to start to look at yourself and get feedback. Are you looking at different psychological stuff, energetic stuff, relationship books, getting feedback from your partner, asking your partner what it was that you did wrong, what could you have done better? In a social situation, you want to have other experts or friends that can show you how you could have been socializing better. Right? In a business situation, you don't want to just say, I'm going to start Owen's flower shop today and go do that. You want to be looking at the experiences of others and seeing how to successfully run a business and have people come in and nitpick the business. So maybe your business does $1 million in sales, but it could have been doing better. And so you've got to come in and you've got to actually get that feedback. Okay? You've got to actually get that kind of feedback. Now, let me say something to you as well. Do you want to get that kind of feedback? Well, fly out to an event, right? We do free events all over the country. The next two are in Boston, October 18th, Washington, D.C., November 1st. We have one coming up in San Diego that's going to be a whole weekend. These are both two full evening events. Fly in, they're going to be amazing. Every single one's different, but every single one we take you through an amazing curriculum. San Diego and LA will be next. Miami's after that. We're going to be doing them all over the country. Okay, so even if you're seeing this later, we might have teed this up again, but get in there now because they're always changing, they're always different. But we also take you through a very, very special curriculum that's there. It's one of the best parts of it, through a process of transformation. And if for some reason you're not able to fly in, although I'd urge you to do so, again, go to www.higherpurposeprogram.com and just jump into this free program. And this program is, I'm going off the cuff right now, but these are programs that I actually pre-wrote out. They're very, very organized and structured. And this is some of the best content that you'll ever see me put out. Okay, so make sure that you actually go to Higher Purpose Program and get right into that program. And by the way, yes, it's live. Indie Machine Crystal. Yes, we're live. He knows it is. Yeah, people always ask that, okay? So basically what winds up happening is, look, I'm saying this as somebody who's had social success, financial success, travel success, fame, fortune, amazing friends, done amazing things, lived an amazing life. Most of my life living in LA is eating at 5-star dinners all the time. And, I've got an amazing, amazing life. I've got a great, great life. But I've also had my problems, right? And so life is not meant to be this rocket ship that just goes up, 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 up. Okay, life is meant to be you go up, but then inevitably it's going to crash down because of things that you didn't know. Auditing yourself, taking responsibility, taking accountability for what you did, not just thinking that because you read something or saw a video on YouTube that you have fixed it. You're not changed now. Whatever mistakes that I've made, say in the past couple months, I've not changed. Okay, I'm just beginning to understand. Then you go up. Then you probably go back down, then you go up, then you go back down. But what you're trying to do is that as you come to master life, you want to get to the point where as you master life, you could make these mistakes less and less and less, right? And so by the time that you're in middle age, you want to be making less and less and less of these mistakes. And what, again, let's just talk about, let's wrap with this, what is it that you're trying to accomplish here? You're trying to do the following three things. Have an amazing time dating, eventually leading to a family. The most beautiful experience that you can have. Super duper key. I don't care what, all these videos that you'll see online trying to equate, crazy dating success as being more powerful as an experience than having children is silly. Just completely ridiculous. It's cope. Thriving is having children, being a parent. My greatest joy is being a parent. So that, leading towards meeting someone to have kids with. Likewise, is to actually go out and enjoy the world, you want to actually go out and see the world and enjoy it, okay, and actually have fun, not just be this battery in the matrix that just goes to soccer practice with the kids on the weekends, but enjoying life, having adventures. You guys have been watching me do that maybe on my Instagram, all the adventures I'm having. But then it's also leaving a legacy, and it's about contribution, okay, and it's about adding to the world so that when you're dead, your energy lives on. You've added to it. And even if the world's going to get, blown apart someday, maybe sooner than later if we're not careful, that doesn't matter because, there's an old story where there's a kid on the beach, and the kid on the beach is picking starfish up off the beach and throwing them in the water. And this adult comes and says, hey kid, let me tell you something. You can work and work and work and throw the starfish back in the beach or back in the water, but you're not even going to save all the starfish on this beach, and there's thousands of other beaches in the world, and those starfish are going to fry. Don't waste your time. And the kid just looks at the adult like, in the child's wisdom that the adults lost, maybe because of that calcification process that I was talking to you about as they get older. Probably exactly because of that reason, actually. And he looks at him and he says, "You're crazy." And then he just runs back down and just keeps throwing back in the starfish that he can, right? Because it's not about the end result. Look, the end result is that the world will get blown up someday anyway. The sun will go out someday, right? It's about the process itself, and it's about who you became. It's about who that kid was being in that moment, by throwing down the starfish, right? And so it's about who you're being in that moment. And it's about living a life where you've been coming from the right place, and the richness that you'll see in the expansion of your core essence, in the growth and expansion of your soul, and the process that you're going to go through that humility, but also taking in the wins and enjoying those wins, like actually enjoying the physical, right? A lot of people in spiritual growth, religion, they think that there's too much pleasure of the flesh. I don't view it that way. I think we've been brought in this world to actually have a lot of fun, and to go see beautiful things, and to go have fun, and to have amazing experiences, right? We worship God by actually enjoying the earth, not just by looking at the internet and doing boring things, but by traveling, by branching out, by seeing what the world looks like, by having adventure. Also by having children, adding to the world, adding children, having the best values that we can have, and then adding children into the world that also have great values, leaving a legacy. But maybe most important of all is who we become at that core essence. Because our time here is very, very short, and when our time here ends and we go beyond the veil, we want to be going to the right place. And not just selfishly, but we want to actually live that and inhabit that for its own sake. Even if when you die, lights are out, well then this life that you have is your version of infinity. It's all that you know. So whatever the case, that's also important that we're coming from the right place, okay? So I wanted to make a video, like I always try to make videos that fill in the gaps, like the kind of videos that really, like, anybody who's winning probably knows this stuff, but they don't want to talk about it. It's kind of like the hidden truth that people that are truly winning know, but don't want to talk about because they feel that you're not at a level to truly let it land. They feel that you're not grown up enough to see, the ups and the downs, right? It's kind of like when you run a business, they'll say, don't let the lower level employees, know about the cash flow or know about the inner workings. They can't handle it. They're too simple. So I think a lot of teachers feel like if they don't just put winning and winning and winning in front of you, that you'll give up. It sounds too scary. But for whatever reason, I try to attract an audience here of people that are critical thinkers, people that can handle it. That's generally how I've communicated throughout my career. And so I'm here to contribute to you my view of this and my experience after 43 years. So I'm just sitting here. I'm a, 43-year-old bald man in a pink jacket, just sitting here riffing, kind of playing my little song for you. I hope that you've enjoyed it very, very, very much. I'm really, really, really excited to see you at one of the free events. Boston coming up, DC coming up, www.selfhelpfreetour.com, San Diego and LA after that, Miami after that. We got a bunch of them coming up, okay? If you're in New York, get signed up early, okay? We get bonuses when you sign up early. And if for whatever reason you can't fly in for any reason, all you got to do, it's obviously amazing to be there and meet me in person, but all you got to do, www.higherpurposeprogram.com, and I've created a whole course in there completely for free that takes you through the most incredible social epiphanies and incredible foundations of self-help, the exact kind of ones that I've talked about here, talking about how to make more cash, get better social results, be more spiritually tapped in, expand your entire life, and do it in the right way in the process, exactly like what we talked about here. So make sure that you come to the free event, okay, fly in, but otherwise, check this out right here, which is actually a very, very, very detailed course. I know that you're going to absolutely love it, okay? So I hope that you enjoyed the session here together. I love you very, very much. I'm here with you. I see you. Thank you. Hope that you took something out of this. Be back with more soon. Peace.